Greetings and welcome back to another Perspectives. Today, I have a truly unique episode with none other than the legendary Pimp of New Zealand. Yes, I am talking about Spetsnaz, the man who brought light to darkness many moons ago. He is back, telling us all about his adventures as a professional sheepshagger. Spetsnaz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. For people listening, this is probably the third or fourth time he's actually re-recorded his introduction. We've had a few.
This one was the best one, though.
It was, but the thing is, you make it up on the fly. You're like this.
Yeah.
Every time, that is a gift, my friend.
Yeah. Well, as my mother used to say back in the day, that and $1.50 will get you on the subway. Anyway, so today long story short, I was very fortunate, and Spetsnaz contacted me, and I'm always open to new perspectives talks on new countries, and New Zealand's just one of these countries that's kind of off the beaten record. I mean, it's just out there. Nobody talks about it a lot. It has a certain reputation, I guess, but it seems like a nice place. I mean, that's kind of the only thing you can think about when you talk about New Zealand as an outsider who's never visited. But if we want to start, say, with the history. I mean, I can actually start a little bit with the history because I'm interested in evolution.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I mean, New Zealand is one of the two major islands of the South and North, islands that had never really. I mean, I don't really count the last 800 years when the Maori invaded from Polynesia, but effectively had no mammalian life apart from whales and seals, which are marine mammals, and that certainly had no human beings. And thus, New Zealand developed in an environment, an ecosystem specifically, because that's my interest. It's very unique in terms of the fauna you found there, and very, very sensitive to disruption. And I think once we talk about the Maori and destruction of the moa bird, which was, of course, the biggest land bird or flightless bird in living memory, or non-living memory recently, as well as the host eagle, which was its primary predator, which was massive too. So New Zealand has basically evolved the animal life, and the land mass evolved without mammalian interference, and in particular without human interference. Now, you fast forward a few million years, the Maori people are, of course, Polynesian in origin. Their language is Polynesian. It's related distantly to the Hawaiian language and the various other languages spoken, say, in Fiji. They arrived about 800 years ago, approximately, and they brought havoc with them because you take a place like New Zealand, north or south, that's literally for millions of years been in isolation from the world, and then you, of course, have a corresponding ecosystem and environment that's been undisturbed. And these guys just go to town. They see, temperate climate. Oh, this is fantastic. Let's take advantage of it. And I think if I remember right, the moa bird, for those who don't know, it was a huge flightless bird, bigger than an ostrich, was hunted to extinction within about 200 years. And there are even reports I've read that Maori had to resort to cannibalism because basically the other thing that happened was it didn't take a lot of skill to kill a moa bird. Their only predator was the host eagle, which was this massive eagle, huge wingspan. They didn't expect, bipedal apes throwing spears at them. So it was really easy, and they basically got fat and lazy. And when the supply ran out, they had a lot of problems. There were wars, or conflicts rather. I don't want to just give that as an intro based on my own sort of ecological knowledge of the place. That environment was severely disturbed by the Maori. And I think it's a bit of irony as we're going to be talking about the Maori Wars and other things, I suspect, that there's all that resentment towards, I don't know, the English or what became sort of the white New Zealanders as invaders when, the Maori weren't all that different a few centuries back. But
no.
I'd like to just end it on there and let you take over because you are the true pimp of New Zealand.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Always makes him cringe. Absolutely, you're right. I mean, in terms of New Zealand, in terms of its history, roughly, mean, Abel Tasman was the first one to make contact with New Zealand. He came in the 1700s. That was the first of 3 voyages that he actually made to New Zealand. After that, there was James Cook. And after that, of course, we had the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. That was in 1840. That was William Hobson, who was New Zealand's first governor. He tried to govern peace between the Maori and the Europeans. And of course, we had a lot of trickle effect from Australian convicts landing on Australian shores. They came to New Zealand in terms of whaling, all the rest of it. They set up an economy all to themselves. But yeah, I mean, in this talk, it's kind of an uncomfortable talk for myself and for anybody who's listening who's got any sort of affiliation to New Zealand, because it's things that are never talked about in regards to New Zealand. There's I wouldn't call it propaganda, but there's there's that clean green image that you get of New Zealand. There's that, that's when we're appealing to Europeans, when we're appealing to British, especially, just in terms of the job market, in terms of the economy, in terms of the landscape and the economy and all the rest of it. It's a lot of it's founded on a lie, and that's very uncomfortable for people to hear. But when you go right back to it, the basis of New Zealand is founded on a lie. It's founded on a lie, and it's also founded in incompetence. If you look at the Treaty of Waitangi, that was founded in 1840. When William Hobson, he got all the tribal leaders together, and he got them to sign a treaty that was basically duplicitous. So, I mean, war broke out in the 1860s as a result of it. But, I mean, it was a major difference in translation. I mean, the Maori version had the Europeans governing the country in the name of the Maori, while the Maori retained sovereignty. And either that was created deliberately, was created accidentally. And now either that was deliberate lie, or it was established in terms of complete incompetence. Either way, these two attributes, fraud and incompetence, they become deeply ingrained in New Zealand culture. I mean, that is the absolute basis of how we are founded, and that is a very uncomfortable truth in regards to a lot of truths about New Zealand. But I think us as men online, in terms of the manosphere, if we can, group it as a community, I think that's what we strive for. We strive for truth and understanding. And to do that, we have to be honest, and we have to be, we have to confront the truths about the situation. So it's very hard to have that conversation with Kiwis around that subject. Australians, not so hard, but
well, yeah, I don't know, Spetsnaz. I've had conversations with Australians, in particular, Coltrane, and we'll talk about things that are uncomfortable, like the crime and murder, because it's a similar situation.
Sure.
We'll talk about this in Maori with the Aboriginal people. The disproportionate number of criminals, the crime, the lack of progress that's been made, and that is a taboo topic. And if you mention that in a public forum or work, I mean, you're going to lose your job. So I think maybe that's true, but certainly as an outsider, I mean, I have always thought, maybe when I get truly, truly old, although I feel really old, had my birthday recently, a place like Dunedin, worst one yet. Someplace just remote and so it sounds sort of nice, but there is that green image of New Zealand. New Zealand venison, famous.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Sheep shagging, best sheep shaggers in the world.
Oh yeah.
Rugby,
absolutely.
It's sort of just, it's kind of this nice place, isolated from everything. But of course, there are a lot of problems there. There are drug issues, methamphetamine, in the Southern Island, and as far as the Maori are concerned, you worked in the prison system. That's why I think might be helpful. I have an article here that will explain the situation. I'll just read the first paragraph. Mm-hmm. Maori, who account for only 14.7% of the New Zealand population, and this was in 2009, I guess it's gone up, commit more acts of violence than any other ethnic group in the nation. And the reasons for this apparent fact are not obvious. Some blame poverty and deprivation, while others believe it stems from a century and a half of colonization. There are others who would blame this propensity of Maori towards violence on this very nature, resurrecting racial stereotypes of the past that have been discredited. If not nature, what else might be the cause for disparity in criminal convictions between Maori and Pakea for acts of violence. Anyway, just a little intro there. So I wouldn't call them native people. They're not. They only arrived about 800 years ago. But the people who had arrived before the European settlers, the Maori, are disproportionately represented in gangs and poverty, basically the lowest echelons of society in prison.
Yeah.
They have a lot of domestic problems. Now, I have my own ideas as to why this is the case, but maybe you could, since you've actually lived through it and dealt with them directly, maybe you could give us a bird's eye view of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've worked with them in the prison system. I've worked with them in outreach programs as well. If you look at the term Pākehā, which is in reference to whites in New Zealand, Caucasians, if you look at the actual term Pā, it's in reference to rough translation is shock. It's by golly. It's it's surprise. If you look Kiha, that's the common word for ghost. So if you can put that together, also in terms of I know rough translation, it can mean pig, it can mean rat. So it has negative connotations to it as well. But yeah, I guess in terms of just how they've sort of integrated into society, or the lack of integration, what I would say in terms of the success that I've had working in outreach programs, working within programs within the prison system, I'd say the breakdown is intrinsically linked back to the family, but the solution is in the family itself. I mean, when you go back to it, it's the children, the son, they're following in the footsteps of the father. This is what we find. They're falling into youth gangs. They're falling into gangs, into that sort of segment of the community, because they have no father figure. They have no solid foundation in their life. But I mean, when you touch on it, I mean, there's a lot of other factors involved. I mean, Barbarossa has spoken on this. Yourself has spoken on this. Spousification, parentification, all of this being projected onto the son. All these responsibilities. He's the man. He has to go out there and earn. Why aren't you going out there? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you following in the footsteps of your father? It's generational unemployment. It's generational dependency on social welfare. We've got a system in New Zealand. We are talking about generations of people, especially in the Maori community, just dependent on welfare. There is no incentive. All there is just regret and resignation, and it's very difficult.
Resentment is another, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's very similar, Spetsnaz, to the tale of Native Americans in Canada, the United States, who are sort of on reservations. Just it's usually sort of a tale of woe with a lot of dependency. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, obviously, but this sort of welfare dependency. Well, I certainly know what it's like to fall into a rut. I've never been on welfare myself. I mean, being welfare dependent for generations is basically a type of rut. It's basically like you've been there. It's hard. It's really hard to get out, and usually you need a shock to the system to get yourself out of a rut. Now, I guess in the case of welfare, well, the best case scenario would be to be cut off from it. But then one wonders. I mean, this is a concern that people like Coltrane have, that if you were to cut off these sort of intergenerationally dependent welfare recipients, whether it be they're Native Americans or Maori or Aboriginals, what will be the consequence? Now, he fears that, you get even more violence rather than, working jobs and sort of reintegrating themselves into society. Right, I don't know. Right. I don't know what the direct consequence would that be, but unlike a rut where, I mean, a kind of normal individually based rut where there's something that you need to sort of shock you out of the system.
Yeah, definitely.
It's, I don't really know what.
Yeah.
What the solution
is. I mean, from what I can say is the successes that we've had in terms of sort of reintegration into the community for ex-inmates of Maori descent, we've had a lot of success. but the successes come from actually. You've got to find someone within the community, within the family dynamic, that can act as a catalyst for change. And it takes a lot of groundwork. I mean, when the father or the son goes into jail, there's a lot of responsibilities laying on his shoulders, and we can criticize that culture of gang violence and all the rest of it, but that's integrated into the society. That's who they are. That's all they know. So if you're putting them in for a long prison sentence or a short prison sentence, it's very disruptive. It destroys family dynamic. So you've got the wife or the mother now losing that income earner. You've got the son or the daughter now without a father. And as a result, they're leaning back on other resources. They're leaning back on their direct environment. So it's a lot of repeat behavior. If they don't have any kind of positive social change in their life or positive support systems, they're going to lean back on their peer group. They can get involved with youth gangs. The mother is going to become dependent on other forms of income, whether it be drugs, whether it be prostitution. It's very disruptive.
Are these people being imprisoned, are they being imprisoned for sort of drug offenses, or are they actually committing violent crime?
Yeah, both. I mean, this is what they're used to. This is the culture. You're dealing with people that have never been integrated into society to begin with. And we've got a lot of policies now, lobby groups that campaign for shorter parole periods, or no parole periods at all, longer prison sentences, all the rest of it. Every MP that comes into office after the fact, I mean, this is what they're campaigning for, to give us a sense of security. But the whole purpose of reintegrating someone into society in terms of parole period, it's giving them the tools so they can reintegrate back into society. I know a lot of guys that come into jail and they have no resources, to the point that they get they're going to have funds deposited into an account so that they can function in society. They don't know how to set up a bank account. It's to that extent. So they go out and knock someone over the head so they can get brought back into jail. I mean, it's just, we're not equipping them with the tools that they need to reintegrate back into society. It's upsetting. I mean, you put in all that work, but it's got to be across the whole dynamic, not just the individual, not just the man. It's got to be across the whole family dynamic, and it's hard to get people to come around to that way of thinking.
I'd like to just bring in my own sort of personal interest in this, and that is to say, genetics. There is some indication that there's a gene. It's called the warrior gene. I don't think it's probably the proper term, but MAO. That there's evidence to suggest that this gene is associated with things like anxiety, depression, impulsivity, obesity.
Sure.
A lot of obese Maori. I think, as with many things, this is a complicated issue involving both the environment and genetics, and it's hard to pin it down to you shouldn't pin it down to any one thing. It's one. I mean, you get people to say it's all about the nurture and then it's all about nature. We all know that if you ever spent time studying human beings, it's usually about both. But I think I do think there's a genetic component here, although not exclusively. But I get the feeling that I get this image when I talk to Coltrane of these sort of yuppie Melbourneites or Sydneyites. I don't know if that's the right term for them, but anyway, who they support Aboriginal culture, blah 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 blah, but as long as it's not in their face, so they don't want to see the knifings that are going on between the tribes, or the destitution or the crime. I mean, it's like, we'll support it, but meanwhile they're chilling out in their Melbourne or Sydney. So I can't. If I think of New Zealand, and I don't know, maybe you can confirm it, it's probably a similar situation in places like Auckland and other as well. We support the Maori culture, blah blah blah, but just keep out of our faces, kind of thing. My impression is that the idea of sort of supporting these people, whether they're Aboriginals or Maoris, the typical, I guess, English descended or European descended New Zealand or our Australian, really, it's just sort of lip service. They're like, yeah, I'm doing a good thing. Yeah, give them the, help them out. But they don't really care. Not really. I mean, you look at the prison system that you worked in. I suspect that would be the impression.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what I'd say about New Zealand is there's a lot of uncomfortable truths that people just they're very uncomfortable with actually studying it out loud, which is a real shame. Because I mean, if you look at New Zealand on the whole, I mean, we've got the fastest growing rate of social inequality of all OECD countries. I mean, it's not just in regards to poverty. It's not just in regards to child abuse. It's not just in regards to suicide. It's across a whole spectrum. I mean, when you look at Maori, I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about a connection to identity. We're talking about a connection to whakapapa, to their family dynamic, to the culture, to the land. And when we look at them, what do they have? What do they have currently? I mean, they have lack of access to any kind of strong, cohesive cultural history. But I've seen it in rehabilitation programs when they have access to their own language, to the genealogy, to the whakapapa, to the marae. These are really strong preventative measures against all kinds of problems that we see in regards to what we see with the suicide rates in terms of what we see in regards to mental depression, all the rest of it. These are really strong preventative measures, and it's not something we have in New Zealand. There's no real strong, I suppose, connection to the history that we have. It's a very rich, diverse history. But you talk to anybody on the street, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, to be fair, Spetsnaz,
from the Dutch to the Chinese to the Celtic to the Bohemians.
Right, but I mean, I've talked to Australians. I've met them traveling and online, and I mean, I suppose it is an interest of mine. I know more about the animal life in Australia than they do. I mean, I get the feeling that places like Australia and New Zealand, I don't want to conflate the two because I think it's interesting and important that maybe you talk about the differences eventually as well, but it kind of reminds me of like another America. It's just sort of really far away from everything, but they're kind of just, they want their malls and their luxury, and Americans don't really fucking care. I mean, if you ask, there are all these things on YouTube, asking Americans about their history or whatever, and they can't even name, the first two presidents, for example, or when did the Civil War? I think this is not a unique thing. I mean, I hate to generalize, but most, it's same with Germans. Most people are just kind of, they want to eat fucking shit and be comfortable, right? I don't know if they want to shit, but anyway, they have to, regardless. But I think that's a common thing. But in New Zealand's case, there is that image of tranquility, and it's all green and nice, and
It's a myth. It's an absolute myth. We're absolutely filthy in terms of our beaches. I mean, if you live in Auckland, which I did for a long time, I mean, you can't swim at the beaches. It's completely uninhabitable. A lot of this is just, I don't know, you base it on groupthink. It's almost cult-like behavior in the way that people internalize it. I don't know. I think it's a side effect of a lot of New Zealand's isolation and just our small population. I think really it's just born of ignorance and brainwashing.
And a lot of New Zealanders want to get out.
Australia. Absolutely. I mean,
you're no exception in some regard.
It's one way. If you look at the actual, the amount of people that are actually going over since 1973, I think we had the Trans-Tasman.
I remember that
deal. I mean, they don't even stamp your passport when you go over. I mean, but we are the second underclass.
Australians resent you. I did research for this a while back.
Absolutely.
There have been talks about limiting the stipulation or the amount. Because it is one way. Although New Zealand clearly has a much more favorable climate, at least from my taste. Economically, I think you've mentioned this, Australia has higher wages, more wealth, more comfort, better health care, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go to Australia, I mean, you're looking at a 30 to 40% increase in terms of wages. And that's across all sectors, not just health, which I worked in. And I've worked in a number of sectors in Australia and New Zealand. It would be construction, labouring, sales, hospo, all the rest of it, property development, all the rest of it. It's generally a much better level of living. I mean, in New Zealand, I mean, you're going to get very poor housing, you're going to get low wages, you're going to get no overtime, you're going to get no bonus or commission, you're going to get extremely long hours, you're going to get companies that are very disorganized in terms of how they run things, and lack of culture, you're going to lack of passion. I mean, these are things that just need to be addressed with New Zealand, but they never do. They put out that clean green image, they put out this image via the Tourism New Zealand. It's not accurate. You talk to any Brit who's come over on work experience, and they'll extol the same thing. It doesn't live up to its reputation.
You do have the Southern Alps, right? And you have Mount
Cook.
Oh
yeah, it's beautiful too.
Yeah, Southern Ireland in particular. Southern Ireland's very attractive in terms of its landscape.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, you've got some of the most beautiful landscape in the world. I mean, if you go down to Queenstown, it's beautiful. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about New Zealand. You strap a surfboard to the top of your car, and in 2 hours' time, you're done Waihi, or the rest of it, you're catching the waves. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. But like any country, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed, but they aren't.
Yeah. I mean, you've spent a lot of time in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, you've kind of existed in both worlds. Besides the wage issue and the money, it's clear, Australia has more mineral resources. It's just more wealth and comfort in general. I mean, what would you say the differences are in terms of living and lifestyle? Because I could comment on the linguistic differences. That's a separate issue. But sure. I mean, when you're a Kiwi in Australia, apart from what is your experience as a Kiwi in Australia?
Yeah. Well, I'd say a lot of things. We share a lot of common similarities, but a lot of certain things are repressed and certain things are celebrated. If you look at someone, you could look at Samuel Marsden, could be one example. I mean, in the 18th century, we had a bunch of Australian convicts come over to New Zealand, started up the whaling industry, all the rest of it. But Samuel Marsden, I mean, he converted the Maori to Christianity, basically to protect them from the corruptive influence of these Australian convicts. But really, it was just a power dynamic. But as a reward for embracing the gospel, they were given guns, which led to a lot of other problems. But it's a good example of the respective ideologies. In regard to someone like Samuel Marsden, I mean, he lived in Australia. He had to deal with convicts, and he was known as a sadist. I mean, he enjoyed the physical misery of other people, of human beings. So he's completely unknown in terms of Australian history. Nobody knows the name. But in New Zealand, he's considered a hero. He was someone who's seen as a saviour, that was saving Maori from the corruptive influences of the Europeans, all the rest of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of examples of like that.
Well, I mean, talk about sort of New Zealand isolation. What's suicide like there?
Suicide is right off the level. I mean, youth suicide is one of the highest in the OECD. It's absolutely brutal. When you're looking at youth suicide especially, you're looking at number 1 or number 2 cause of death. I mean, it's almost double the national road toll, which is absolutely obscene, because the national road toll in New Zealand is absolutely brutal.
I read that in particular it's very bad on the Southern Island because there are very few prospects for the youthful males above all, because it's always the case that more men kill themselves than women. I suppose that could also explain the incentive to go to Australia. I suppose part of it is also the sort of sunnier image, bigger, sunnier. And then, of course, we have events like the various earthquakes in Christchurch, which is the largest city on the southern island. And it certainly doesn't, I mean, when you look at it in that light and you read about the methamphetamine issues, it kind of quickly loses its bucolic image of this sort of nice green mountainous place where you take a holiday, although it is over a 30-hour flight, so I don't know about that. But that's why I can't visit the place. I think that's the other thing is people. I think people just don't care about New Zealand. It's not. I mean, even Australia is more on the map for people as this sort of giant. It's a continent, right? A giant place. People think of koala bears. No one's going to...
I've actually hugged one of them. They're very... he was dead clawed. That was great. That was in Brisbane.
Oh, right. Well, you got to watch out for the drop bears, but apart from them, they're okay. But nobody thinks about the New Zealand stick insects, although they're there. Like, wow, what about those? Or, it's just... In a lot of ways, it's even more exotic, but it's just... Every Kiwi I've talked to, with very few exceptions, always wanted to leave and sort of get out. To go somewhere, Australia, United States, UK, Europe, whatever. And maybe that's just because I myself am an expat and that's the kind of communication I have. But, I mean, you've spent time outside. If you wanted to, you could live in the EU because you're of Irish descent.
That's
right. What are the ties that bind? I mean, you still maintain contact and sort of roots in New Zealand. What keeps you there when it effectively it's such a miserable place?
Yeah, I mean, I love New Zealand. There's a lot of great things that I've established over the years in terms of connections with other people. But I mean, it's a young country, but a lot of the things is that we have a very fragmented and very uncertain identity in regards to who we are as a nation. I mean, you can look at common risk factors. You can look at these are all universal across all countries. You can look at mental disturbance. You can look at mental illness. You can look at poverty, isolation. You can look at unemployment, all the rest of it. But we're not digging deep enough. With New Zealand, there is a complete lack of culture. It's passionless. You could live in Auckland, you'd know what I mean. There is no connection. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in South America, I've lived in Asia, I've lived in America, I've lived in Europe for a number of years. I've never experienced anything like the amount of disconnection that you would find in New Zealand. You would think you would only experience it in the main cities like Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. No. If you meet a Kiwi overseas, they are the most welcoming, friendly people that you will meet.
Yeah, man, I still remember.
Oh, yeah.
This was, I think mid to late 90s, I was backpacking through Scotland back when I was youthful and more vigorous. And I remember I met up with a guy called Pat, and we traveled together for 3 weeks, lost contact with him. But we had a fantastic time. We were, I remember getting on a ferry with him during a storm to the Outer Hebrides, and I think we thought the ship was going to sink. It was just a really fun, friendly guy. I'll never forget him. Really, that's more or less been my experience with a lot of them abroad.
Yeah. But I mean, in this country itself, they're very close-minded. They're very protective. They're very isolated. They will not engage with you. They become very, very defensive. They're very xenophobic to people coming from other countries. I don't know. I don't know how you classify it. Maybe groupthink. Because we're so isolated, man. We've got such a small population.
Island mentality,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's born of ignorance. Maybe it's born of brainwashing by governments and officials. But I mean, if you get right down to it, it's a boring, isolated country.
Fair enough.
It is. I'm sorry, and it's it's the clean green image that they promulgate. It's not accurate. It's not true. I mean, you've got if you travel through New Zealand, you've got, God, you're dealing with a lot of very small towns. It feels like they're cloned. Stretches of boring driving between isolated towns in which people have got the same small-minded mentality. So I'd never step foot outside. It's hard to describe. That our suicide rates are through the roof, in regards to males especially, and there's a reason. It's fragmented. There's no connection. There's no connection to a cultural identity. There's no connection to a male identity. It's hard to identify. But I mean, I've been in LA. I've been all over the world in different countries, and I've never experienced the kind of disconnection that you feel in New Zealand.
Well, I suppose it's a question of what constitutes being a Kiwi. I mean, obviously the PC police would want you to prop up sort of this Maori image of whatever.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a connection to British history and European history too. I can't imagine anyone endorsing that because, well, typical reasons that we've become accustomed to. So I'm not really sure what you're left with. Obviously, a guy who's descended from the Irish or the Dutch or the British is not going to really feel a connection, whatever lip service he pays to the Maori people. And the Maori are, they resent the European settlers. So it's kind of, I don't really see. And there's another difference that I notice. In Australia, it's easier, frankly speaking, for the white European descended yuppies in places like Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane to sort of pay lip service to, all the Aboriginal culture is great, because they're never dealing with it. They don't even see it. New Zealand is much smaller, and I think you encounter a lot more Maori there than you do your typical Aborigine, because they're just sort of out there in the middle of nowhere. And I think that helps to create this sort of lack of sense of identity. It's much more sort of, it's a smaller place. It's more intimate, for lack of a better word. Whereas, your average, from my experience talking to them, I remember trying to have a conversation with a guy who's now a major YouTuber for gaming. He's an Australian guy, super left-wing liberal, talking about the problem of crime in the Aboriginal community, and I got shut down. Not in the sense that he had a counter argument to what I was, or at least a point. It's interesting, but I could see how the closeness of everyone there sort of cuts into or interferes with people's ability to form an identity. But I don't know. I think identity is this big question these days. What am I? Recently made a video, and I think it's an important question, especially in this age of identity politics. But how many Americans feel really American, and what does that mean? What does it mean to be German?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm a bit skeptical of the idea that anyone really feels a close sort of sense of identity. Because to have an identity, and you've traveled a lot and lived different places, maybe that's why you have a Kiwi identity. You need to be able to sort of compare and contrast. Now, I would say I don't have a very strong American identity, but I would argue that too is borne out from the fact that I have lived and traveled in many different places. So I can say that is American, or these particular qualities or traits or what have you, they're American, and I do not personally either recognize myself in that, or I can't really relate to it. Now, clearly, you, after traveling a long time, you still feel very Kiwi-esque, for lack of a better term. But most people, I think most homebodies don't. I mean, what does it mean to be an Australian if you've never left Brisbane, or a Kiwi if you've never left Auckland, or American if you've never left Milwaukee? If your only experience is the homegrown experience, you'll have a sense of identity, but I think identity can only exist in the context of comparing and contrasting to figure out what you are and what you're not. I mean, this is how I've forged my own identity, just because I realized, okay, that's not for me. And I was just complaining just before we started this how one thing I do miss about the United States is express queues at supermarkets. So I was standing there for almost half an hour with a packet of blueberries in my hand and everyone else with 30 items in front of me and thinking, can we get on with this? So, I mean, I don't know if that's an identity issue, but I mean, being able to compare and contrast in that way is a very useful tool. But when you only have a singular experience that really just doesn't go beyond, I mean, for example, I love Coltrane to bits, but I think he's only been in the United States. He seems very Australian to me, but what does that really mean? And I think it's a complicated issue, but I actually think that being outside of your so-called native country can often give you insights that you'll be lacking in. And maybe that's why the Kiwis you meet abroad tend to be, mentally, socially a better stock. I don't know.
It's interesting. Wherever you go in the world, you're going to run into a Kiwi. Remember,
back in the day, that was definitely the case.
Yeah, I remember I was watching the sun go down from an Aztec temple in Peru one time.
Actually, the Aztecs were in Mexico, so you're referring to the Inca.
Yeah, that's right. But it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, and I was watching the sun go down, and who walks by in front of me? Just another cunt in an all-black jersey. Says, "Oi, do you know Bob from Timaru?" No, I don't. So, he's fucking stand-up cunt, hey? Next time you see him, say fucking hello from me. I don't fucking live in Timaru, you cunt.
Yeah.
But, they're intrepid. They'll go all over the globe. But I mean, in terms of Maori culture, I mean, I only reference it because I've seen such great turnarounds in terms of the guys that I've worked with in regards to prison culture. If you look at it in comparison to Australian culture, in comparison to Aborigines, I mean, Maori culture is far more prominent in New Zealand society than Aboriginal culture. Maori, it's an official language. It's taught in schools. It's used in government departments. It's broadcast on television. And it's with Aboriginals. I mean, it's not really possible to make that language a institution. I mean, from what I understand, there's over 250 different Aboriginal languages.
Yes, many very different from each other.
Yeah, you'd know more about that than I would. But there's a lot of cultural differences between Aboriginal tribes. So in that regard, it's probably impossible. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in terms of the successes that I've seen with Maori in comparison to white prisoners, to white inmates, it's about finding that catalyst for change. They can find someone within their whakapapa, within their family, within their wider social circle that can act as a mentor to them. They've got a great degree of success in reintegrating back into society. If they have a connection to the language, to the genealogy, to the whakapapa, to the marae, those are all preventative measures that we can put in place. But it's very difficult for white New Zealanders to have any form of cultural identity. I mean, nothing is celebrated in terms of who made this country what it is, in terms of the Dutch, in terms of the Bohemians, in terms of the Celtics, Celtic immigrants who worked in the mines and all the rest of it. I mean, there was great tradition there, but all of that's lost. I mean, Australia has Australia Day. What does New Zealand have? It has Waitangi Day. It's always a day of great conflict.
Well, to be fair, Coltrane told me that Australia Day is sometimes called Invasion Day by the PC left-wing crowd, but yeah.
Yeah.
But what are your views on this whole reconciliation? I mean, I think the past is the past. I think it's important to pay attention to it, but harping and clinging to whether it's on an individual basis, past events, or the colonial history, be it Maori Wars or so-called Invasion Day in Australia. I mean, what's done is done, and I think I'm curious how your view on this, how much, harping on these issues in the context of New Zealand and Maori really actually helps them move forward as a community, or if it's something that they should effectively get over. Like you get over an ex or an ex-wife or whatever. It's hard, it's difficult. It obviously had an impact on you. You can learn from it, but at some point in time, maybe it's 10, 15. Like I went through some pretty traumatic experiences with ex-wives, but some of them are like 15, 20 years old. It's so distant now that, yeah, it had an impact, but, time to get on with my life. I mean, how do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I can come from it, from sort of the work that I've done within the prison system. I can go back to look at the Parole Act of 2002. I can look at the Sentencing Act of 2002. Just extending the scope of preventative detention, which in itself is just it's referred to as indefinite imprisonment. As a result of that, it's
Martin, nice to meet you.
Politicians doing what they're doing, just campaigning for votes, just based on
fan of me.
the media hysteria that we put out there about the increase of crime, what have you. But I mean, prison sentences, they increased. As a result, there were fewer early parole releases, greater number of recalls for parole violation. As a result, lobby groups, Sensible Sentencing Trust, they were campaigning for longer sentences for offenders, all the rest of it. But all it led to were just guys coming out with just no support networks, nothing. Right now, we lock up more people than ever in our history. Violence right across the system is endemic. I mean, we had 1,500 assaults last year within the prison system. We had a complete takeover. There was Serco, who were a British founded private company who took over the prison systems in New Zealand. As a result, they got pushed out. They couldn't handle it. Violence just increased through the roof. So the corrections, they came in and took back control of the prison system, but it's had no effect. I mean, the violence is still endemic. But prison populations, I mean, they rise when you make choices that make them rise. When you restrict parole, when you lengthen prison sentences, when you toughen the bail laws, when you sentencing laws and parole laws just increase to keep violent offenders off the street. But at what cost? I mean, when you look at it objectively, violent crime continues to rise.
What are my
Look at the reasons as to why. I mean, the majority of inmates, especially Maori inmates, they're completely illiterate. They have no understanding of numeracy. They have no understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. They have drug, alcohol problems. They have generational dysfunctional families, generational unemployment, their generational substance, alcohol abuse histories. They have lack of education. They're completely disconnected from their family and the wider communities. There are no support networks. And they're being raised in social welfare families. I mean, there is a complete cycle. We can identify these risk factors, but nobody's putting two and two together. We're campaigning for all these extended prison sentences, but at what cost? Now, as a deterrent, I don't know of any evidence that it's successful in any respect. All it seems to be doing is increasing the problem.
Well, the reward for largest prison population goes to the country of my birth, the United States.
Oh yeah,
proudly more prisoners in the prison system than some countries have people. Good job there. I mean,
the whole purpose of parole is to reduce the risk by managing an offender's reintegration to society and anticipation of their inevitable release. I mean, the alternative is just kick them out the gates with any of those support structures in place.
I think a common man's view, or maybe a societal view, is just like, well, more along the lines of, these are some problematic people. Just keep them out of our way. It's kind of like if you ever walked around any decent sized city or in your supermarket, there's that drunk weird guy talking to himself, and everyone is avoiding him. He's in the queue, maybe he reeks of alcohol, or he's talking to his keychain or whatever, and nobody really wants to associate with him. but he's not really doing anything wrong. Well, if that guy actually did something wrong, people will be more than happy to never see or associate with him again. And I think that's the most prevalent attitude towards people in prisons. Well, good riddance. I don't think people. I mean, you gotta give yourself credit for being invested in this because you had a direct hand. I mean, you were involved in the psychology of these prisoners and you worked in the prison system. Although I take it on some level it almost destroyed you mentally because it was very taxing and demanding. But to the average person, they just see like that guy, that drunk, weird guy talking to himself in the queue. He's just one step removed. If he actually stole somebody's wallet and he's gone, and everyone's happy to see him go. I don't think most people have the same level of compassion or interest because you worked in the system compared to you. And I think that's a very, because you can hear, compare and contrast your interest in sort of reforming the prison system versus people just have no interest whatsoever. Of course, in the United States, there is talk about lessening or decreasing prison sentences for nonviolent crime, drug offenses, or what have you. But I don't really think your average man or woman thinks too much about how do we reform the prison system. How do we reintegrate people? These people are viewed as problem people, and they're not other people's problems. So I think that's just the most common perspective, I think. Not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what most people think.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny when you talk about the guy on the side of the road that's sort of talking to himself and people looking at him sort of. Yeah, I can imagine that's how people perceive MGTOW. MGTOW content makers.
I don't know. These days I don't even know what MGTOW means. There's so many.
No, neither do I.
I don't really use the moniker very often. I don't shy away from it if somebody says, "Oh, maybe my lifestyle is something similar to that," or what you heard. But sure, I think that these days it's a bit off topic, but there's a lot of there are all these kinds of fractious new movements or communities out there, and they all have, I guess, an agenda, or if you want to call it that, or a purpose. I think MGTOW is often seen so, for example, if you look at traditionalism or the alt-right or any sort of related faction, MGTOW is terrible because it discourages reproduction and the dream of 3,000 children and a white picket fence. Then in MGTOW is bad for the anti-feminists like Sargon because it's too extreme. I mean, I don't really think. Here's the thing, though. I think with regards to MGTOW, and it's a bit off topic, but you were once a luminary, or perhaps still are. The thing is by its very fractious nature, I think MGTOW proves its point, which is to say that it's never really been a community. It's just like a bunch of guys who kind of do their own thing. Some of us make videos, some of us don't. There's no overarching. I mean, there's certainly an overarching theme in some sense with relation to females. Some kind of examination of female behavior. But you can be a guy like Angry MGTOW who's like, white women are afraid that all the men are gonna, some video like that, or you can, make a video like the late great C.S. MGTOW used to make. Now, so there's a lot of variation there, but I don't. There's nothing really directed I see in MGTOW, and I don't think that's ever been the case. And so, people spend a lot of time trying to scramble their heads around the idea of what is this? Everyone. I mean, I made a video recently, but everyone wants to pigeonhole everything as something, right? And things that rather vigorously resist a simplified and easy definition are very often rejected and ridiculed and treated with hostility. And I think, am I a MGTOW-minded man? Sure. What does that mean? Well, in my context, I don't marry, I don't date, etc. I mean, but that's only really telling part of the story. Obviously, I have other views and things I think about the world, but I think that's the problem, that people. The easiest way to pigeonhole MGTOW is to take things like Angry MGTOW or some of these other gentlemen who make certain types of videos, and that's what it is, But to me, it's not very clear. Whereas you look at anti-SJWs and anti-feminists, and I think there's a lot more sort of overlap with the views, and just sort of it's much more easily defined. I suppose women haters, right? But that there are fractious factions in MGTOW, if you want to call it that, that are women haters, I guess. But I don't really think that. I mean, nobody in real life really that I interact with. I mean, they don't even know the term. They certainly know my preferences and what I don't like or don't want, but nobody's saying, oh. But even, and I'm sure if they were exposed to it, they might think it's a bit weird. And I'm sure, and I know they think that my lifestyle is pretty weird. But what are you going to do? I mean, it's I don't really take offense to that, to be honest. It's just because I don't see myself as part of some faction or community. I just see myself as well, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this as an individual, But yeah. So I don't.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, in terms of New Zealand, I follow statistics fairly closely. What was the norm is now changing. They estimate by 2033, I don't know how they came up with that number, that the majority of people, around 53%, will be people living on their own. So they won't be in relationships, they won't have siblings, all the rest of it, they won't have children. It's interesting in terms of migrant population as well. I can see how that factors in. But I guess in terms of the sort of MGTOW, in terms of that sort of male perspective, where I'm at in society is I'm just tired of having the finger pointed at me in regards to everything under the sun. People always point at men. Just in regards to suicide statistics, in terms of mental health, in terms of fallout, in terms of crime and all the rest of it, because I've worked at a ground level in regards to that. So it upsets me in terms of the finger is always pointed back at men. That men can't open up. That we need men to start talking about the problems. But I mean, you've talked at this at length. That if a man actually opens up, he's going to be judged for that. It's going to hurt his career opportunities. It's going to hurt his social perception, all the rest of it.
Relationship.
And just relating that back to New Zealand, we used to have a very strong identity in terms of farmers, in terms of those soldiers that marched off to Gallipoli, all the rest of it. You look at someone, Colin Meads, who was captain of the All Blacks, also a farmer. He was known as the Oak. You look at someone like Buck Shelford, who was captain of the All Blacks as well. He lost his testicle in the middle of a game. He reconnected it and walked back out on the field. No problem. So we have a lot of articles like you have in, I'm sure you have in Germany, also in the US, saying where have all the real men gone? What's happened to the male identity? That they're no longer what they used to be. Of course they're not. I mean, the thing is that they're far removed from that now.
Well, I think it's clear what's happened.
Absolutely.
I've documented this quite well over many years.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a domino effect. Women are the it sounds weird when I say this, but women are the movers and drivers of men. And so the environment shifts, you get this mechanization, you get the modernization effect, and then women change their behavior in suit because, they're women and they react to the environment. Over time, men for a while don't know how to gauge this, so, 70s in particular, divorce goes to the roof in every major westernized, industrialized country. I'd say that, not necessarily MGTOW specific, but all of these sort of weird, different sort of movements or groups popping up, which are dominated by men, whether it's MGTOW, the alt-right, whatever, these are all reactions, latecomer reactions to things that had been set in motion many, many decades ago, because women are the movers and drivers of men. So the question is, not where were all the good men gone, but as I always say, what has changed in the environment to affect female behavior, which in turn affects male behavior. Because if there hadn't been a birth control pill, if there hadn't been certain political revolutions or innovations, I don't like the term innovation, but changes, I suspect all the quote-unquote real men would still be doing their real men stuff. But I mean, this is why I don't really get upset anymore. I'm just too blunted and jaded about everything. You can't get too upset about it. I mean, most people don't have any insight into this and don't really care. And I made a I was playing an online game. It's related to this. I was playing an online game with an associate of mine the other day, and I was in the wrong chat. I was in the team chat versus the group chat. The group chat was the private between him and me, and I made this statement about, healers being played in the majority by women, blah blah blah. And the guy says, "Oh, I'm not an SJW, but that's really sexist." And it's, it wasn't really. People don't care, and they're not particularly critical. There's nothing controversial about the statement I made, incidentally. But even though it was not meant for his ears, still, this is the society we live in, and I think you only can get so far by raging and rallying against it. I mean, rage feels great up to a point, but I know, there's no solution, and we're not going to change the world. We're certainly not going to change society's perception of men. And as technology moves forward and progresses ever further, and people become more and more deranged, I'd argue that the current year is possibly the most deranged year thus far, with all these crazy, wacky ideas about just about everything under the sun, particularly coming from the left. There's no people aren't after the truth, Spetsnaz. I think this has become apparent to me ever more so over the years. So whilst it's annoying to see a placard of some poor victim, blah blah blah, female, or just in there's a famous shoe store in Germany called Deichmann, and there's a lorry that I always see drive through the neighborhood, because there's one that's not too far from where I live, and in German there's an advertisement. It's a play on words. So the word for lorry in Germany means both lorry and vice. So it'll say "Das ist mein Laster," which means that's my vice, but that's also the lorry that carries the shoes. And there's a picture of some woman with about 30 or 40 boxes of shoes. Like, it's just shit like that. It's like, I have to roll my eyes every time I see it. Das ist mein Laster. But I mean, it's the way our society is wired and the way it works. And I can't change the world. I learned that a long time ago, and all I can do is try to understand it. And if people want to help, participate in that understanding or have a discussion, I'm usually more than willing. But I think people say, Western civilization is fucked. I think as a species we're kind of fucked, and I'm not too happy about that. But what can I do? I think at least you're still, maybe because you're such a pimp, you're still you're still very much feel like you got something to fight for. That's good, I guess.
Fuck. I'm not going to allow you to make me cringe. You do it so well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to beat them ladies off with a stick,
Ah, fuck you. But I agree with everything you said. There's been a complete shift, and I've noticed that in terms of my interactions with females and males. In terms of the mating culture, I wouldn't even call it dating culture anymore. I don't know how to describe it.
That's what it is. I mean, dating is mating, basically.
Oh, Christ, I don't know anymore. I mean, the guys that I know, I hang out with a lot of guys, because of my background, a lot of these guys are models, a lot of these guys are...
Funny?
Ex whatever.
Like, what's funny about it?
But, they're sleeping with the same girls. It's girls going with the top 20% of guys. As a result of the social circle that I'm in, I have access to these women if I choose to, which I don't. Because, a lot of my friends are sleeping with the same woman, and it's a lot of them having unprotected sex. I don't know. There's just been this huge erosion, even over the last 5 years, in terms of dating culture. Everything has changed. There's a lot of guys that are just not even getting a look in. Guys that have got a lot of good prospects, all the rest of it. But at the same time, guys that are, that have been, awakened to the risks and the liabilities involved, they're not wanting to get involved with that. And I don't blame them. You talk about financial risk, you talk about legal liability, you talk about STDs, you talk about all the rest of it. I mean, these women are having unprotected sex. A lot of guys that I know, they're going from cock to cock, basically, to put it bluntly. It's
riding the cock carousel.
It is, and it's repugnant and it's repulsive. And I know a lot of girls used to do that when I was a teenager, but my God, it's right out there in the open, and it's not even a question of compromise anymore. You talk to other men about it, and they'll say, "What are you, a homosexual? Don't you want to get involved with that?" And I say, "No, I don't want to ride the town bike. I don't want to expose myself to STDs and that kind of risk. I value myself. I value, the integrity of another human being."
In our next exciting episode of Riding the Cock Carousel, we bring you Mary the Cock Teaser. She's had sex with a limited number of men at just 71, but she does give you a mean blowjob, so for that reason it might be worth it, even though her vagina is infested with maggots. Thank you for watching this episode, and we're happy to see you next time. There we are.
I mean, I like in New Zealand especially, I was involved with a lot of community groups, and I know that the HIV infection rates have exploded over the past, I think, 5 to 7 years. I mean, they've gone up by 300%. I mean, you've got STD rates, gonorrhea, syphilis. There are now strains of gonorrhea that are now resistant to treatment.
It reminds me of the good old days, 1980s NWA song, Dope Man. Or was it another one? I think it was 88, talking about gonorrhea. That's all right, brought back some fond memories. Go ahead.
No, but I mean, to a lot of guys, I mean, what I would say, I would never advocate for a man to actually go out there and start having casual sex with women. I would not advocate it.
Even
nor would I condemn. Nor would I condemn him. But I mean, it is a minefield out there at the moment in terms of legal risk, in terms of financial liability, in terms of health risks, all the rest of it. It's pretty bad out there. So it's something you have to weigh up.
I mean, it's a fact that men place a pretty high premium on sex. There's no doubt about that. But is it all worth it at the end of the day? I tend to think not.
But that's the thing about you. I mean, you've never really strayed from that. I mean, you've got a very high, I suppose, high self-value. You're not prepared to compromise to that extent. And I applaud you.
No, that's the wrong. I just don't like unnecessary stress in my life. Every time I deal with women, I get stressed. I mean, by dealing, I mean more than give the money to the cashier. When I have any kind of involvement that's longer than a 5-minute conversation, there's always some issue. Even online gaming, dealing with women's sensitive feelings and shit. I mean, this is shit I just don't want to deal with. And, the amount of effort you have to put in if you're an average-looking guy like me who doesn't have a lot of money, frankly speaking, to get quote-unquote laid is fairly enormous and simply not worth it in my estimation. Maybe if I were an Adonis, but even then, if I retained the same mind, I would think twice probably about casually fucking marry the cock teaser, just because, who knows how many dicks she's had in her, how many diseases she has.
Yeah.
It's why, I mean, my life isn't fantastic, but it's okay, and I see no reason to jeopardize its okayness by delving into something that, one thing is certain, will rob you of your money and your time. Can't get time back money, sort of. It's just, I just don't understand what's worth it about it. I mean, you're not going to find your wife these days, and I never wanted to get married anyway, so it's just... What? To have some low quality sex? I'm not really sure. What's the point? Meanwhile, you can beat it off in 10 minutes, get those horrific urges and instincts out of you, which I can't stand personally, to get on with your day. Why would I ever do. I don't know. To me, it's pretty.
Yeah.
And it's not that I've had good sex in my life eons ago, but it's just, and I'm old too. I'm not young anymore, So it's not like I have. I mean, I still get hit by these urges, but I'm not 20. I'm thinking, I gotta get laid. It's. We've obviously overvalued. I mean, sex as a commodity. We've overvalued it. We live in it's everywhere. There are lingerie placards everywhere where you can see, half-naked women. But I think over time, and the more you think, you just become anesthetized to it all. It's sort of, you just become blunted. Oh, another half-naked woman. Oh, no, more porn. Let me just beat it off and get it over with and move on with my day.
Yeah.
I see, for me, all these guttural instincts are a nuisance. I hate the fact that I have sexual desires. I hate the fact that I have to eat shit and piss. I don't really like being a human being. I would prefer to be something greater than that. So I try to give as little attention to these base human desires as possible because I don't find them productive or interesting, and I find them a nuisance. Now, that's a pretty radical view. I take it. I understand. A lot of people, it's their fulfillment in life is fucking. The next wet hole they can stick their dick into is, whatever. In the case of women,
well,
go on.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is a lot of my guys who, got their blue pill as anything, they come to their realization as well, if in a more indirect way. They're looking at it and just saying, look, the risk to reward ratio it's just not happening. I mean, a lot of guys that I know, they've been looking to me, they've got a lot more options than I have, all the rest of it, they're socially active, all the rest of it, but they can't get looking. And it's a question of compromising to an extent where you're devaluing your integrity, devaluing yourself to a point where you're just, in essence, I don't know, just humiliating yourself. It's gone to that point. I mean, to make a comparison between New Zealand women and Australian women, there was a survey put out a few years ago. It said that New Zealand women, I think it was by Durex, said New Zealand women are the most promiscuous. I've certainly found that to be the case. If you're moving in the right social circles, you'll get a group of females that go out on a Saturday night, Friday night, what have you, and they'll mix with another group which you're a part of, and you end up going home with that girl. That used to be my life, and I was disgusted by it. It never brought me any
Disgusted by
sense
your
of
own pomposity.
Yeah, it was. You'd lie there in your post-coital lust, and you'd feel absolutely disgusted and ashamed of yourself.
That's the point. It's like the same feeling I get when I try, like after a couple of days, like I should just beat it off, get it out of my system. Oh, thank God that's over. Now I can get on with my day. I mean, that's the same thing. Whether you're next to and that's the difference is that I can spend 15 minutes wanking off after 2 or 3 days of not doing it, and then I'm good to go for a while, and I don't have to deal with this fucking sweaty body next to me that I don't even want to be around, to be honest. Yeah. I mean,
the one thing I'd say is that Australian women are far more direct than Kiwi women. But the thing is, when an Australian woman talks to you, whether it be in a social situation or a bar, I've never really experienced the same sensation as I would in New Zealand. Your testicles actually recede inside your body because of the actual crassness of what's coming out of their mouth. A lot of my friends have pointed that one and say, yeah, I've had her. I've had that one. I've had that one. I've had that one. And it just seems like it's the same girls going with the same guys to an extent that, I'm just not willing to compromise on that. I mean, we see a lot of articles now, English newspapers, American newspapers, all the rest of it, and there's a lot of guys saying, oh, yeah, she goes off and fucks other women, my partner and my wife, and I'm completely okay with that. It seems to have moved beyond a fetish into something that's, I don't know, men are just willing to put up with that in order to get validation.
By sexuality, you mean, or?
It's I don't know. It disgusts me that men would go to that level. It's simply not worth it.
Right. Well, I mean, look, it's... it's a minefield, but You know,
Yeah.
some people are happy to walk in that minefield. It gives them a sense of excitement. Who the fuck knows? I mean, I don't
Fuck
tell
that.
people what to do. If people want to date and get married and all that, you know, more power to you. I don't know where you're going to find that quality wife. I mean, I've had my observation of traditional women from Eastern Europe, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. So I mean, it's there's no place in the world where you're going to find that whatever special someone. This is nonsense. As I said in the talk a while back with Red Pill Chemist, you just can't believe anything women say. Not if it changes in 3 or 4 days, you know, like, oh, I felt this way, and it's just to me a colossal waste of time. I mean, it's once again, you know, the post-coital, that sort of post-cum clarity you're referring to, like, you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
You know, you blew your load, you know, good for you, and you're just wondering what you did and why you did it all. Now, a couple days later, if you don't bother to take care of yourself, you'll feel that way again, and you'll end up in exactly the same situation. You know, obviously it's more difficult if you're, you know, a guy like you, kind of like a pimp, but, I mean...
No, you're not going to make me cringe, no.
But seriously, in all seriousness, I mean, it's, whether or not women are easily accessible, I think the effect it has on men. I mean, most men, they just want to be done with it. They're sort of they blow their load and they just want to get out of there, and you know, that's it. And then whether they're good looking or not, have lots of money, and I can't see the fun in that.
No. I think it stems back to I don't know, it's what I found in the prison system, what I found in different outreach groups, all the rest of it. It comes back to an issue of male identity. It seems to be something that we're lacking at the moment, especially in New Zealand.
What's funny about that?
It's, you know, we point the finger at men and we say, okay, men need to open up, all the rest of it, in regards to suicide, in regards to, you know, depression, all the rest of it. But I mean, you've talked at length about this. If a man opens up, he's going to be judged. As a result of that, it's going to hurt his career opportunities. It's going to hurt his social circle. It's going to hurt the perception of him as man. So, I mean, we've got to factor in a lot of external things. We've got, external bias in regards to men. There's external systemic bias. I mean, look at how men internalize hatred of their own sex via indoctrination. A lot of men out there, they don't see any purpose today in dating. They don't see any purpose in marriage, in family, and working full time. It's just so biased and anti-men. They look at that and say, well, what's the reason? Even if they're doing that subconsciously. I know with feminists, especially in New Zealand, it's a very feminist culture. They're looking to equate sexual equality with sexual sameness. As a result, it leaves men unable to make or even give any contribution to society, which is distinctive, which is, I don't know, necessary, and that can be valued. As a result, young men, they can't establish any kind of healthy collective identity as men. As a result, I mean, we've got a lot of these anti-feminists, content makers, that they talk about this at length. But what I've seen just at a ground level, it's the result of all of that is just an emptiness. It's just a growing tendency for men to give up. It's men just ascribing to a negative collective identity because that's all they have. Why not have that if there's nothing else? I can understand
what you mean by negative. I think a lot of people might consider MGTOW to be something negative, but
no, I'm talking about gangs. I'm talking about
gangs
violence.
And violence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's for a lot of men, if you don't give them a wife and kids and something quote unquote productive to do, they start to resort to knives and guns, and it's not universally true, but it is a kind of generalization that I would probably give some credence to, based on what I've seen. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an issue. We've certainly seen it in the black community in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
They used to have very low illegitimacy rates, 15, 10%. Now it's like 80%, and, you know, I mean, crime... crime is rampant, and so is intra male violence and murder. So, yeah, I mean, we're basically fucked in that regard, and fucked in other regards, and there's not much we can do about it. However, I think it's important to shine a light on it still. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. It's great to have a conversation about it. That's what I always say. Even if it's uncomfortable, just get it out there in the open. It's the most important thing to start asking questions about it. But yeah, a lot of the men that I've worked with, and these are guys that are not necessarily brought up in a violent environment, not necessarily exposed to that gang culture. You ever watch that movie Fight Club? You know, there's this whole theme that's running through it. It's about this lack of connectedness, this lack of culture, this lack of soul. As a result, a lot of these young guys, they just respond to the emptiness in their lives by, you know, they try to ignore it subconsciously.
Fight Club, mid-90s, if I recall, or was it a little bit later, 96? I can't remember, but it was prophetic because things weren't quite as bad then. The internet was in its infancy. You fast forward 20 years later, and everything that Brad Pitt's character is talking about, or Tyler Durden rather, it's all true times 20 or times 100. It's a lot worse. I mean, who can blame men who find their only joy in life in video games when the world out there is so dull, so hostile, so pointless? You know, if a guy's doing a 50-hour slog a week and he wants to spend 30 hours gaming on the weekend, why not? If that's his only relief from that crap. It's I think whatever Tyler Durden talked about, and it was very prescient. I mean, prescient at the time, of course, but prescient looking towards the future in our current year. You know, I'm not going to let the SJWs usurp that term. It's it's an incredibly prophetic film. You know, these guys who just feel fairly empty, and then of course you have the female usurper there. As well, who is trying to, you know, get in on the action of meaning, if you will. But looking back on it, there's a lot of things that film sort of ties into today, because people do feel empty, hollow. They feel completely disconnected. And I don't think this is anything intentional. This is just a product of an evolving society and environment, and not every evolution is necessarily a good thing. I just try to be neutral about it, but this is what we've evolved into as a society, and you know, there are consequences to that. But I just observe. You know, that's what I do, because I realize I can't change people's lives. A lot of people will write to me, and, you know, what should I do? Should I do X? You know, as the devil in The Devil's Advocate, played by Al Pacino, says to Keanu Reeves' wench at the time, was played by Charlize Theron, I think. He says, well, you know, my dear, the worst vice is advice. And you can't, I can't really tell people what to do, but it's important to make these observations and shine a light on it, because at the very least people feel like there's something, you know, wrong. I remember years ago, before I actually started watching Barbarossa videos in 2010, I'd argue that Where Have All the Real Men Gone? Like, that is something that was much more common back in those early days, when it was just a poorly understood thing or phenomenon, and also poorly researched, and there weren't many voices speaking on the subject. And I knew something was up back then. I was very purple pilled for years. Like, it's strange, you know. I think what we've entered in the stage now, Spetsnaz, in say 2017, is this kind of, well, it's a kind of apathetic acceptance and conciliation with the situation we find ourselves in. Like, yeah, men aren't quote unquote real men. Yeah, everything kind of society is the way. What can we do? It's not really a question people are asking themselves because everybody knows, even these moronic SJWs, the anti-feminists, everyone knows why there's been a displacement of so-called masculine identity. But at the end of the day, it's common knowledge now. I think it's like who gets married these days except idiots, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's not like this isn't 2010, 2011 where this was news, you know. And so people just kind of accept it, but they also realize there's not much that can be done about it. I mean, there are different groups and factions that are fighting against it. I think mostly it's just to make them feel good about themselves. But I don't see a lot of these sort of I mean, you see them on occasion, but it's just like, oh yeah, society's changed, women have changed, blah blah. That's just the way it is. What can you do about it? And I have to say, what can you do about it? I think we don't want to malinvest our time and energy and resources, mental or otherwise, in a losing battle to prove a point.
No.
That's why I think MRA-ism is kind of futile. And well, whatever, the anti-SJWs, I mean, they just have a lucrative market, so I don't blame them for doing what they're doing. They aren't doing it for ideological reasons largely, although they're not a part of it. But when I was a much younger YouTube channel, I suspect I was more invested in changing the world. There's still things I'd like to see that I probably never will, almost certainly never will, changes in human beings and what have you. But there's that old American, or is it a New York saying, you can't fight City Hall? Well, I fear City Hall is everywhere now, in every country virtually. And taking up arms against a sea of troubles, or by opposing end them is the question. And I think Hamlet's question is a very relevant one now. But I think the answer is, I think the better answer is pretty clear. Whereas to Hamlet it was a real dilemma. It's It's just overwhelming. City Hall is everywhere, so I don't know. I mean, people call me apathetic, but what can you do? If people ask me, I get people write to me sometimes, what do you think about X, Y, Z? Yeah, I can tell you, but it's your life. I'd have men angry at me for not telling them what to do with their lives at times.
Yeah.
Hostile towards me. I have this degree. I'm going to finish this degree. I'm dating. What do I do? It's like, I'm just a guy. I'm not a professional counselor. It's not my job to tell you what to do with your life. What works for me won't necessarily work for you. I mean, there are all these kinds of expectations there, because you're right. Men are looking for guidance and they're looking for some direction. I think, I've talked a lot about the alt-right, which I'm not necessarily hostile to, but I'm also not, necessarily super friendly with. But and these are men, by and large, majority men, who don't have any direction, so they find some common purpose in something. It feels like, I guess they feel fulfilled through it. But that can be true of basically anything. There isn't a new masculine identity. It's just human biology interacting with a new environment. And, well, as I said, we're kind of fucked as a species. But hey, it's been given the opportunity to experience it a bit, so why not?
Yeah.
Enjoy that New Zealand venison while you're at it.
Well, we export all of it, so
I know, dude. I totally fucked up. Last year I ordered a kilo of New Zealand venison, which is very expensive, and I kept it in the freezer. And I'm not really a cooking expert. I asked Coltane, it's over a year old. I think keep it in the freezer. Yeah, can I eat this? Well, generally, even the freezer after 5 or 6 months, you don't want to eat it, so I had to chuck it away. But I mean, you guys have some prime venison cuts. I'll tell you that much. It's unrelated, but it is tasty.
We used to do a lot of home kill, but they brought in a lot of regulations against it. So, what can you do? But no, I mean that's a lot of valid points. I mean, you look at suicide rates in New Zealand. Just to bring back to New Zealand, I mean, you get guys in today, 2017, trying to respond to, I don't know, the emptiness in their lives, the lack of meaning. They try to ignore everything around them and try to ignore the misery that basically exacerbates that emptiness, or they try to internalize it subconsciously. They try to do everything they can to just shut it out. But what happens? They end up acting out. They end up, attacking a hostile society. Some give up. Some, end up abandoning an indifferent society. Doesn't give a shit about them. What have we got? We've got fathers being ostracized from family home, especially in New Zealand, especially in the black community. In America, due to tax incentives, due to social welfare, policies, all the rest of it. And so fathers get ostracized from their children. As a result, these young men are growing up without any real sense of male identity. So what do you have? You've got the innocence of boyhood, absolutely lost. But in the same breath, you've got the maturity of manhood lost. I mean, that's unprecedented. I mean, we haven't had that before in society. So what have you got? You've got few, and we see this online, which is a very small, minute speck of what we're seeing there. Fewer and fewer boys just wanting to become men. They don't want to become men. Because, fewer and fewer men can actually convince them that, that doing so would mean, I don't know, contributing anything distinctive and necessary to a society. It doesn't give a fuck about them.
What does that even mean? These
exactly.
days,
Exactly.
A man. It used to mean, working your ass off, getting sick, ejaculating in some woman, impregnating her, she pops some kids out. I mean, okay.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, no one's come up with a solution yet to the problem of toxic masculinity in a toxic cultural environment. We haven't even identified the problem.
For the reasons cited previously, there is no solution. I mean, you could blow everything up and we could start all over. And I know there are people who want to do that, but I mean, that's not really a solution. In fact, I have a theory. No. I've talked about this before, of the cyclical nature of civilization. I think, given certain prerequisites, given the same conditions and human attributes, regardless of what might happen, you'd always end up in a similar situation. If women are the way women are and men are the way they are too. So let's say everyone, these guys who want to go back to the good old days, whatever that means, blew everything up. So maybe in 400 or 500 years you'd have the same problem. Now they might feel good about blowing everything up and having women dependent on them again, but I mean, this is, no one's come up with a solution because there is none. I mean, the solution, I think, as I've mentioned many times, lies in transhumanist ambitions. We need to transcend human nature, because human nature now is an exceptionally limiting force. Our need for certain types of foods, our need for sex, all these things are incredibly disruptive to actually improving ourselves. In fact, I'd argue that human nature, in its current in the current environment, is the biggest weight and anchor holding us back from having a healthier and more productive society than anything else. Because we just can't adapt that quickly, and so we just, women riding the cock carousel, men feeling, I mean, better just to erase it all and start all over with something much better than our very base and limited and primitive human nature. I think this is the solution now, and a lot of people don't like hearing that. But always working, what we have now, that is human nature, this rather inglorious thing, in my opinion, working with an environment that doesn't work well with it. So what are you going to do? And people think, I got to get back to traditional. How are you going to do that? You want to destroy the world? Okay, good luck with that. You want to do X, Y, Z. It's human nature is it's dysfunctional in this context, and only marginally functional in previous contexts. And so the solution really is to either get rid of some of these burdens that we have evolved with, and that's my view, or to continue to fall down into a funnel of never-ending suffering, misery, and ever further dysfunction, which I think is what we're witnessing and what will happen. You know, and half the world isn't even on board. Half the world is still praying to fucking Allah and living in the Middle Ages. I mean, we're really far away from that. So I mean, no solution. Well, there's a long-term solution, but nobody seems to want to work on it because everyone is afraid of confronting this thing called human nature, and everyone's afraid of actually acknowledging that maybe it's not as great a thing as we make it out to be.
Yeah.
In this context. I mean, I'll allow Coltrane to continue eating his meat and potatoes and shitting because he seems obsessed with that. But for me, I'd rather just have a pill that deals with all of that and, you know, get on with my life.
Yeah.
I'm not. I really, having spent all these years observing human nature and just male and female nature in particular, it's just, I don't feel any hate towards it. It just seems like nothing but an impediment, really. Really, all it seems to be is an impediment, and I would love to be over it, to not have it. You know, every time I want to be productive, you know, feel some random horny urge, so I got to blow my load, and all of a sudden things are better. You know, every time I need to do something, I got to take a 20-minute shit because reasons. You know, it's like, I don't know. Why is this good? Why should this be enshrined as something positive? No, it's not positive for me. I'd like to be something more, something better. But hey, a lot of people aren't on board with that. I think that is the only long-term solution. The only long-term solution is to overcome human nature and to be better and better than it, and to surpass it and be something completely different. But you know, working within our limitations, as it stands now, there is no solution. I haven't seen a single group offer a positive solution to quote-unquote fix these problems. Because as long as we have this very fixed and limited human nature, sorry, I'm going on a sort of transhumanist rant here, but human nature is not working for us. No, not now.
No. Well, I mean, I could talk about the prison system. I mean, the guys that we find reconnecting with the whānau, talking specifically about Maori inmates, you know, they've got a 4 to 5 times more likely ratio of actually reintegrating back into society and non-offending. I mean, God, yeah. It goes back to Maori saying, I can't remember the pronunciation, my pronunciation is shot, but it basically saying that without culture, without language, without a sense of mana, which is spirit, without, you know, connection to Mother Earth, to the land of your people, without the essence of who you are, essentially you don't exist. So there can't be any Māoritanga, there can't be any connection to Māoridom on the whole. So there can be no essence, there can be no identity, there can be no spiritual link to the tribe or to the family, there can be no sense of self. And I've seen a lot of this in the prison environment. More with the old school inmates, guys that get mokos on the face, so it's a tribal tattoo on their face. It's a reflection of their ancestral history. They need permission from the tribe to do this. For a lot of these guys, they get this done without the permission of the tribe. And these guys coming in with drug problems, methamphetamine, all the rest of it. So they're sort of borderline psychotic when they come in. They come from very abusive backgrounds, all the rest of it. So that plays a part. But these guys, they lose all kind of rationale with their reality. These guys start acting out. They believe that their ancestors are coming after them because they didn't get the guidance or the permission from the ancestors, and all the shame and guilt comes back to haunt them. I've seen these guys try to top themselves. It's act out violently, brutally, all the rest of it. So a lot of the programs that they put in place for a lot of the Maori inmates, which they comprise about 50% of the prison population, they're far more likely to reintegrate if we're including the whakapapa, their family, with the reintegration process. As long as we're making it okay and safe and viable for their extended family to accept them back into the community. If we're making it so when they go inside, that the wife, that the children aren't falling into
destructive habits and all the rest of it, falling in line with the wrong people, all the rest of it. If we can get that working, they've got a much higher chance of reintegrating back into society. So, I think a lot of the answers lie with the family, just as, a lot of the problems lie with the family. I think it all traces back. I mean, I remember a guy, he was Hell's Angels guy that I worked with quite comprehensively, and he said, if you've got a blocked toilet, who do you call? Call a fucking plumber. If you've got a gang problem, if you've got a problem within the family, with a extended family, part of a gang, who do you call? Call a cop. You don't call a social worker. You call a fucking gang member. Because they understand the dynamic, and there's truth there. We've got to go back to the source. We've got to ask, what's working, what's not working. How are these guys reintegrating? Or what are the problems at the root level? All the rest of it. Because you can't measure, that kind of progress unless you're going to the root source. So, I think the answers lie right there in the family dynamic. But we're not going there. We're not asking the hard questions. We're just pointing the finger at men, as we always do. It's unfortunate.
Well, I'd argue that, once again, human limitation, all this tribalism, I don't know. If only we could, I hope I won't live to see it, but if I had been born in this decade, there might be a good chance to see some of these actual changes implemented. Whether it comes to the tribal nature, he's saying that so in order to reintegrate, they need access to their tribe. I mean, these are just primitive limitations. I acknowledge that's probably necessary, but I don't know. This is the human animal is just to do something. To see everything we do that's social at the moment, it's just a band-aid because we're not really reaching for the core issues of human nature, which would mean fundamentally altering our neurology and chemistry. But again, I'm going a bit transhumanist here. But we've been talking for a while here. It must be pretty late. It's getting late here as well. Any prospects for future videos on your end? I'm sure the audience would like to know.
I suppose not at this point. I mean, the one thing is I've probably made about 3 or 4 videos in probably a year and a half or 2 years. It's just one of those things. I mean, I want to thank you. Basically, I always tell myself that I need to be more engaged online, but I never get around to it. Life is a way of getting in the way. But
I'm a rich and fulfilling life. Why would you want to be engaged online? I guess it's not nearly as rich or as fulfilling.
My life is quite boring, actually. But no, I mean, what I'd like to say is, I'm very grateful to yourself and to others. I think it's important to acknowledge that. You've had a large effect on me and on others as well. I mean, I think I've had effect on other men as well. I recall in the past, I'd be at social occasions, all the rest of it. I come home, my preference would be just turn on one of your videos, Barbarossa's videos, and actually listen to what you had to say.
The golden age. Unfortunately, the days are gone.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was listening to that well before I started making content, so I sort of came in on the second wave. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, those days were man-woman myth, especially Barbarossa yourself. It was amazing. I just recall listening to you in very dark times. I found it very helpful, and likewise with a lot of other channels. A lot of channels probably don't know, but they have very low subscriber counts, all the rest of it, but still they had an impact on me. A lot of those channels now are gone due to doxing from other people within the community manosphere, which I think is gutless and cowardly, and it's just a huge waste of opportunity. You got other channels that are going strong, but at one point I think with a lot of men that sort of tuned in, I think the manosphere and that kind of content was very important to me. And talking with yourself, Barbarossa, Gregory Becker, Nico Chosky, I mean, those were always
very quality conversations to me, interactions for me. And like I say before, you're all the catalyst for change for me when I need it, and I appreciate that. You came in at a very important point in my life for me.
Well, I appreciate that, but I assure you, I did nothing, did very little. But your thoughts are nonetheless appreciated. I appreciate the positive feedback, but I can assure you, I've done little to nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy who makes videos sometimes. Nothing beyond that.
Yeah. No, but I need to be appreciative and respectful of that. I don't know if I've been that way enough. I don't know. And that's not.
It's not necessary. I don't need. It's really
Yeah,
not necessary.
No. I mean, it's not guilt. It's just. It's just an appreciation of what we have.
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate that, and I have a lot of love and respect for that. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, I appreciate discovering Barbarossa many years ago, but at the end of the day, we're just guys who make videos, and if I or somebody else has had a positive impact, that's great. It is a shame the conflict within MGTOW, and we've lost some people for a variety of reasons, and certainly the golden age, that exciting period, is long gone. But some of us must press forward, as they say. Soldier
Indeed.
on. So let's hope that we'll hear more from Spetsnaz in the future, although that's certainly not a guarantee. A man with his exciting jet-setting life and the women that he repeatedly beats away with a stick.
No.
It's just a poor prerequisite for making videos. But hey, anything's possible, at least in this context.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's a video about New Zealand and Australia. Well, there's a reason why, Aussies are drinking out of saucers while Kiwis are drinking out of cups, because we've got all the cups.
There you go. And a lot of sheep too. We never actually got to talk about the sheep shagging, but maybe we can do that in a separate episode, because that's just such a massive topic that could potentially take 3 hours. So, everyone, thanks for tuning in, and thank you for tuning in to Spetsnaz, the legend. He is known by some an elusive legend at that. So we're grateful for having an elusive and difficult to track down legend such as himself here. And I will check you out for probably another Perspectives coming up soon. This time, if my Perspectives date shows up on Norway, which I've been trying to get more Scandinavia for a while, and other material, of course, in the future, assuming I'm alive and not dead. So everyone, thanks for tuning in, and take care. And thank you to my guest, the legend, the pimp, the torchbearer, Spetsnaz.
Thank you.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.